When it comes to sessionable beers, I'm a sucker for the style of Belgian Single. It's an easy drinker with delicious Belgian esters and offers flavours ranging from biscuity to slightly honeyed. Brülosophy contributor Will Lovell is experimenting with keg conditioning this beer. One batch was keg conditioned with honey, the other with table sugar. Would participants and Will himself be able to tell the difference? Let's find out. This episode is sponsored by More Beer. More on them in a bit. So, Will, are you as big a fan of Belgian Single as I am?
So I actually have some lukewarm feelings about Belgian Single, in all honesty. To be honest, when I drink a Belgian Single, I just wish it was a triple.
Well, yeah, me too, but I kind of wish that about almost every beer.
I think that's fair. If it was a triple or a golden strong, I think I'd be set. But I do think that for a sessionable beer, I think a Belgian Single is a very nice beer that you can go through and get a little more crushable. It's no wonder that the monks, the fathers, the potters themselves would drink this as their daily driver.
So this is a keg conditioning variable. So tell me a little bit about what keg conditioning is.
So keg conditioning is kind of like bottle conditioning. I think most of us started out bottle conditioning where you'd brew your beer, and at the end of fermentation, you would get the bottling bucket, and then you would add sugar into the bottling bucket and then add your beer on top of that. And then you fill up all of your bottles individually and cap them off. And then that natural fermentation that happens with a little bit of sugar added would carbonate the beer. Keg conditioning is kind of the same thing, except for instead of putting into a bottling bucket, I literally just I've got my sugar or my honey, as it were, in this experiment, and I add it into the keg, and then I just do a pressure transfer into the keg, and then I let it all just kind of naturally carbonate and carbonate inside of that keg.
So talk me through actually brewing this beer. And let's start with the recipe. So what was your malt bill and hop schedule?
Pretty simple recipe. It's just 10 pounds of Texel Milano Pilsner malt. I did a pound of Belgian candy syrup, and this time I just used the Simplicity candy syrup. It's the lightest one that the candy syrup manufacturers make, and it comes in like a green pouch. And then I also did a pound of Cara 20 from Dingman's. And then I had either for the keg conditioning step, either 103 grams of sugar or 136 grams of honey for that step. For hops, 60-minute addition of 8 grams of Magnum, and then 30 minutes, 45 grams of Sots, and then in 5 minutes, 45 grams more of Sots. Pretty simple beer, if I say so myself.
Yeah, and then for yeast, obviously getting the right yeast is very important here. We want those Belgian esters in that single. So what did you go with there?
Look no further than Imperial Yeast's B48 Triple Double. It is the West Mall strain, I believe, and that is, to me, the go-to Trappist strain if you're going to be brewing a lot of these Trappist-style beers.
Completely agree. All right, so we've got some footage here of your brew day. Talk me through brewing this beer before we got to the variable.
Well, it was a fine afternoon, and so I weighed out all my grain for 2 identical batches. Then I milled it. I also measured out 2 identical volumes of water into my Delta all-in-one brewing systems, and then brought them up to a mash temp. Once they got up to strike temp, I added the grain, and then proceeded to mash them for 1 hour at 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Typically, if you're trying to drive the dryness and a little bit of lower, drier finish, you want to get that 149 degree Fahrenheit just to kind of drive that through. And then after the mash was done, it was a no sparge. I just lifted up the basket, let it drain, started bringing it up to a boil. Once I got to a boil, I added the hops at the scheduled times. And once I was done with that, I got my jaded immersion chiller, cooled it all the way down to roughly 90 degrees is what I can get it at in the summer. Our groundwater is pretty warm here, and once I get there, I will rack it over into my Delta firm tanks and then use the glycol chiller system that I have to cool it down to my yeast pitching temperature, which in this case was around 66 F. For fermentation, after a few days, I decided I wanted to ramp that temperature up, so I let it go at 66 F for 3-4 days, and then I would ramp it up to closer to 70, 72 degrees to try to drive the fermentation character a little bit further.
Right, and then we get to the actual variable of this, which is to add in the honey or to add in the table sugar. So tell me how you went about that.
So I kind of wanted to keep the amount of water that we added to be roughly the same. And so for the sugar, I did about a 1/4 cup of water with 103 grams of table sugar. And I kind of heated the water up and let that sugar dissolve so that it kind of more readily go into the keg. And then I just racked on top of that. And the honey was a very similar process where I kind of heated up a quarter cup of water, and then just added in that 136 grams of honey to that. That way I can kind of keep the amount of water I'm adding as precise as possible. Obviously, there's about a 33-gram difference between the two. That's because honey is less fermentable than just straight sugar. But I just wanted to kind of keep that as close as possible for when I was doing this.
Now, we are going to take a look at how this turned out, but before that, a quick word on today's sponsor, and that's More Beer. More Beer's slogan is absolutely everything for beer making, and it's easy to see why, given their selection of over 8,000 products, like the Brewbuilt X3 Uniconical stainless steel fermenter, or the Comos series of kegerators that give you everything you need to get started with dispensing and serving your home brew. And for quality fermentations, More Beer carries Cellar Science yeast and nutrients. More Beer offer free shipping on most orders over $59. Also, be sure to check out their really awesome YouTube channel featuring brewing tips, hijinks, and incredible giveaways. Check out everything More Beer has to offer at morebeer.com. Okay, Will, so before we get to the actual tasting part, when you poured these beers, how did they look? Were they carbonated properly?
Typically what I like to do with keg conditioning, so you're letting them naturally carbonate, so they're going to sit around for at least a month for me. I think I waited closer to 6 weeks before I started collecting data on these. Again, it's a lighter beer, so you don't need quite the long keg conditioning time, but this is probably a style that does benefit from a little bit of aging, not a ton, but a little bit. And then once I poured them, they were perfectly carbonated. They looked great. Maybe not crystal clear, but they were pretty nice looking beers.
Now, before we presented this to tasters with a survey, Will had a go at tasting these beers himself, performing 5 semi-blind triangle tests.
So kind of the way this goes, I have 4 cups. They're all the same color. Nobody's here, so I don't have anybody to help me. Maybe I should try to lease Martin's son out at some point in time. Maybe he can come over and do that. I don't know how expensive plane tickets are, but surely the Brülosophy show budget calls for that. But anyways, right now the cups with the X marks on bottom, if you see those are going to be the one with the honey, and the one with no marking on the bottom is the one with just table sugar used for keg conditioning. I guess that we're expecting that I should be able to tell these apart based off of maybe a little bit of honey flavor or aroma that might be residually left over during the conditioning process. So let's dive into it and see if we can tell the difference. Shuffle it around. I came in from my garage is where I poured them in. I set them down, and I really have no idea what order I set them down in. I don't really know what I did shaking them up right there. And then the other fun thing is I don't know which 2 samples are going to be the same, whether there's 2 sugar or 2 honey in this one. So we're just trying to find the odd beer app and see what we can see. I want to say that both of these have a lovely honey aroma, but it's hard to tell. Okay, they all kind of have a lovely honey aroma, so go figure on that one. Based off of aroma, I kind of want to say that these 2 are the same, but let's go ahead and give a drink. I'm going to say these 2 are the same based off of flavor. And hey, I'm right for once. It's nice to be right once in a while, right? There's just like a touch of sweetness, maybe. It's kind of hard to describe. It's very, very subtle. Man, these are so good. I'm going to say that these 2 are the same. I'm wrong. I'm going to say these 2 are the same. And I'm right. Okay. Hunker down and focus. 2 out of 3. We're doing pretty good so far. I want to say that these 2 are the same. And I'm right. These 2 are the same. One more time. Let's take a deep breath. See if we can get this nailed down. This has just a hint of sweetness. 4 out of 5. Seems to show that I can, at least with some certainty, maybe not perfectly, but with some certainty, hit the odd beer out.
It's really satisfying, isn't it, though, when you think you're going to be able to tell the difference between these beers, and then you take the triangle test, and you know what? Feel pretty confident you can.
Well, I've gotten so many of these wrong, kind of like you, Martin, that I go in a little gun shy anymore, and I try to put that hubris to the side, and so I was perfectly ready to be 0 out of 5 times, but the fact I got 4 out of 5 felt really good.
So that's a passing grade for Will, but what about everybody else? Well, a total of 20 tasters participated in a triangle test, and participants were served 1 batch of the beer keg conditioned with honey and 2 batches of the beer keg conditioned with table sugar, then asked to pick the odd beer out. At this sample size, a total of 11 participants would be expected to correctly select the different beer, which is exactly how many did. So like Will, participants could tell these beers apart to a degree of statistical significance. How about that?
I'm I kind of went in because, Brülosophy's done some honey versus sugar bottle conditioning, cat conditioning kind of experiments in the past, and I don't believe those came back significant. So the fact that this one did, maybe there's something about this style. Maybe there's something with my approach to how I did it. Maybe it has to do with the honey or the type of honey that I used, but it's really cool that you can get a significant flavor difference just by something as simple as keg conditioning with honey versus table sugar.
I am kind of floored by this result because, as far as I know, almost every experiment we've done involving honey has come back non significant, that it just is sugar that the yeast consume and that's it. But in this case, adding it post fermentation into the keg, it does seem to have made a difference.
Hey, it's only one beer out of however many we've tested, but I'll take it.
Now, the 11 correct participants were then asked to state their preference. Did they prefer one beer over the other?
2 people preferred the one keg conditioned with sucrose. 4 people preferred the one keg conditioned with honey. And then 5 people had no preference, even though they did perceive a difference. So it seems like the data was pretty well split on this one.
Yeah, a pretty big split there, and it's interesting that actually a lot of people said, "Yeah, there's a difference, but we don't mind either way." Did you have a preference for these?
I actually think I preferred the sucrose one. It just finished just a touch drier. Like I said, the other one had a little bit of sweetness on the end. Not that I minded it. It wasn't. I mean, trust me, I only got it 4 out of 5 times, so I was looking for it. I didn't mind it, but I think the drier finish on the sugar was just a little bit preferable to me. But it's okay. Everybody can have their own preferences and drink what they want to drink.
Well, Will, this was a fascinating experiment and a win for honey at last. It's been a while, so really interested to see that. Now, you also conducted another pretty interesting experiment comparing Carafa 1 versus roasted barley in an alt beer. And yeah, you can see that video right here.